This is Tiffany, this is Steven, and this is Tellis and Tamio. Okay. Did you know it was illegal to be homosexual in Texas until 2003? Well, today I'm going to be presenting about the Stonewall Riots. The Stonewall Riots were riots that happened at the Stonewall Inn in New York on June 28, 1969. You might be wondering, why should you care about the Stonewall Riots? Well, because of the political climate we live in, where a lot of people feel very, like everybody is always in the other one's business, it's important to look back at the past and understand why the queer community might come across as abrasive and very in your face. Yeah. And where I am analyzing Stonewall specifically to talk about how queer rights, the stigma around queer people, and the culture of the queer community has changed thanks to Stonewall. But first, let's talk about the rights, the really big issue. So, just to be very brief in what Stonewall was, it was a bar in New York that allowed for people of all races, all genders, and all ages, assuming you were an adult. However, sometimes teenagers would sneak in. Stonewall's had the first push for queer rights, as you can see with this photo that was collected by Mark Stein from a New York journalist. This photo depicts people protesting. It's not the violent part, but to quote Mark Stein from a source he collected from the New York Public Library, the people at Stonewall, after they were told that they were getting arrested, started throwing garbage, bottles, bricks, pennies, and even a parking meter at the police officers. This was also another big event where the queer people refused to be silenced and not be brought into the public eye. As mentioned by Craig Perry, the riots had gotten so loud and the people were so loud at night and the following days that the public of the city started to notice, well, that's kind of strange. I didn't know that they were, violently accosting queer individuals and beating them in the streets for being gay. And it caused a lot of public outcry to start to stir in the New York community. And with that discussed, I think it's good to move on to the queer stigma, since that kind of ties into the rights and how the public was starting to feel. Here's another photo that was painted on the side of Stonewall's window. I think you can still see the boards, because it was condemned. But Stonewall, as well with the AIDS crisis, something that y'all also probably know a fair amount. The two of them kind of went hand in hand because, according to Health Get This, he was a journalist for a health magazine. He said that with AIDS and Stonewall together, the queer people had demanded to be taken care of by the government. AIDS was ravaging the queer community, killing a bunch of people because there's no medications, there's no real education on how to not get an STD, and sometimes sex with a bunch of people or unprotected sex can end up very nasty for a lot of people, and they cannot go to the doctor about it because the doctors would get them persecuted and sent to a sanitarium. And yeah, and then to talk about the stigma around queer individuals specifically, to quote a man who's actually at Stonewall, he said that to him, to be gay represented to be an effeminate man who could not stand up for himself or fight for anything. This is quoting a man named Danny. He was one of the writers at Stonewall. And so for the third and major point, we're going to be talking about queer culture. This is my outro slide, but to briefly touch on queer culture, I have two quotes from Yvonne Ritter. She was a transgender woman who was at Stonewall. When talking about queer people had a very persistent, their culture was defined by secrecy. Sorry, I was trying to find the good words for it. The culture is defined by secrecy. And according to Yvonne, when being asked by an interviewer how it felt to have the Stonewall Inn invaded, she said that it felt like being raped, but that when you are treated as a second-class citizen, you get used to it. You get used to having to hide in the shadows and in the alleys of society. She also talked about how the culture had started to develop this brazenness, this demand to be loud and in your face, and that they were not going to just be silenced anymore. Kind of tying into what I was saying about the riots that happened at Stonewall, the people throwing stuff at the police. Yvonne quotes that whatever was changing that night was loud because people decided that they were sick and tired of being treated like criminals, which understandably. So, now with those 3 big points talked about, I think you'll understand why I picked Stonewall as an important conversation for y'all to hear about. So, just to recap, Stonewall was a major event that signified a shift in queer culture. It was a major event that pushed society's harmful stigma of queer people being soft, docile, and it was a major event that demanded equal rights for queer individuals. I hope that you leave this speech at least a little bit more insightful on why people from the queer community might be very loud and in your face, as that is the culture and climate they had to develop around in order to survive and get the rights that they deserve. Any questions? Or here's our question segment.
How does it seem effeminate for writing?
Well, it wasn't that they were seen as effeminate for writing. That was the stigma that society had seen as. And so if you were found out to be a gay man, they assumed that you were like a weak pussy who couldn't do anything, and that you were basically just like garbage, useless. And they saw any gay man as a very effeminate, like how you might see a stereotypical gay person in modern day climate.